Welcome back, Outlaws. On this episode, I'm going to share with you some walking sticks that I recently made. And then we're going to make one, but not just any walking stick. We're going to be making a shillelagh, or as my grandmother used to call it, a regulator. So stay tuned. A couple of years ago, I made a walking stick video, and I've had some requests to make another one. But first, I wanted to show you some of the ones that I've made since then. Here's one that's out of mesquite wood. I did some fractal pattern burning on it. And then this one, I was tie-dyeing some shirts and I had some leftover dye. So I went ahead and dyed this one and made a Rasta stick. This one I've got a lot of compliments on. I went ahead and inlaid some copper BBs in there and epoxy coated it and dyed the wood with some more leftover dye from my tie-dye shirts. You can't really see it, but it's kind of a blue color. Here's another one that I did a fractal burn on. I used the handle from an old fork, bent that around there, and then I used the handle to a water shutoff valve as the top. This one here is a wizard's staff, and these fissures here, they're natural. So what I did was I inlaid some epoxy. This happens to be glow-in-the-dark epoxy, and I also put these glass beads in here, glass marbles. So that looks kind of cool. And finally, here's another one. I went ahead and used some broken glass and did some more epoxy in here. I think all of these turned out pretty cool. I hope you like them too. Next, we're going to walk over to the stick pile and pick the perfect one for making our shillelagh. Looking at our stick pile here, we have quite a few, and most of these are mesquite wood. So what we're going to be looking for is we're going to be looking for one that's got kind of a knob on the end of it. That'll make a perfect shillelagh. This one looks kind of cool. Let's move a few of these out of the way. Actually, I see one right here. This one will be perfect. This isn't going to be one for hiking, but maybe taking for a walk. So let's check this one out a little closer. Now that we've got the right stick picked out to make our shillelagh, let's look at it a little closer. Up here we've got a nice knob on the top. We'll go ahead and strip this bark off, but here's one last look at it in its raw state. Now that we're all set up in the workshop, it's time to get some of this bark off of here. There's a couple ways that I've tried to do this. I've used a draw knife, and I've noticed that this type of wood, the mesquite wood, when you try to take it off with the draw knife, it does tend to damage the wood underneath, which causes you a lot of extra work later on in sanding. The other thing that I do is I use a wood chisel, and I take it off in strips. That seems to work a lot easier. I've tried soaking this bark, and when you soak this type of wood in the bark, it tends to dye the wood. So I'm going to stick with the wood chisel, but first I put a flap wheel sanding disc on my angle grinder, and I'm going to use that to take off some of these edges right here, like this and this, where I've cut off the side branches, and maybe give it a little shape around the top. That'll make it easier when we go ahead and start scraping this bark off. So I'll get started on that, and maybe I'll explain a little bit about what a shillelagh is, what it's used for, and where it came from. Because I was kind of surprised when I was talking to some people, told them I was going to be making a shillelagh. They said, "What's that?" So I'm pretty sure there's a few more people out there that have no idea what a shillelagh is. So let's get to work on this thing and start giving it some shape. What we're working on here isn't just a stick, it's a shillelagh, or as my grandmother used to call it, a regulator. And trust me, if you were out of line, it regulated you real quick. The word shillelagh comes from the Irish word pronounced Shillelagh. It means a thonged willow stick, but don't let the poetic name fool you. This was a walking stick with attitude, a gentleman's cane by day, and a pub clearing persuader by night. Now here's where things get interesting. The shillelagh wasn't just for strolls through the countryside, it was a weapon of choice in faction fights, wild brawls between rival Irish clans that broke out at fairs and gatherings all through the 18th and 19th century. These weren't just scuffles, they were organized chaos with rules, reputations, and sometimes real casualties. And when the English law banned the Irish from carrying weapons, folks got clever. They disguised their shillelaghs as walking sticks, polished, knotted, and sometimes filled with lead, legal to carry, lethal when needed. It was rebellion in plain sight, and every man knew how to use one. You didn't just walk with a shillelagh, you walked ready. These things go way back, centuries really. Born in the oak forests of County Wicklow, near the village of Shillelagh itself, traditionally made from blackthorn or oak. They were cured in chimneys, buried in manure, or soaked in lard to harden the wood. And as I mentioned earlier, some were even loaded with lead in the tip for a little extra negotiation power, shall we say. So while I'm here scraping bark and grinding down the grain, I'm not just making a stick. I'm tapping into a tradition that's part weapon, part walking aid, and all legacy. And in my case, it's also a tribute to my heritage, a place in time, and a way of life that deserves remembering. Now that we've got most of the bark off, you can see there's some wormholes in there, and we got some of the inner bark still on there, but that's really thin, kind of paper-like. The majority of the big bark is off. We've got a decent shape to it. So I'm going to go ahead and take the grinder, the angle grinder with the flap wheel sanding disc on it, and go ahead and clean the rest of the stick up and work on getting the final shape, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Now that I've made an absolute mess out of everything, we'll have to get all this cleaned up. But we've got the stick pretty much prepared. All the bark's off of it. It's looking pretty good. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get a finer grit sandpaper, and we're going to go ahead and start to smooth it out. I don't know if you can see that there's a few little marks from getting the bark off and using the other sander. So I'm going to use a 60 grit on this sander here. We're going to do the hard work with this, and then we're going to finish it off with a real fine grit by hand. So let's get started on that right now. Now that we've got our stick standing mostly, smooth, we got most of the blemishes out, it's time for the next step, which is going to make this one stand out above others. I'm going to be doing a process called fractal burning. Now, what that entails is using about 15,000 volts to burn lightning patterns into the wood. At this point, I guess I would say a word of caution is advised. Several people die every year by using these devices. Even with all the safety precautions put in place, there's still going to be accidents that happen. So unless you're familiar with working around electricity and feel comfortable doing so, this isn't the hobby for you. To prepare the wood for the process, we're going to be using a solution that consists of anywhere from about 1 to 2 tablespoons of baking soda to 1 cup of warm water. And we'll apply that with a brush to the surface of the wood. That will make the surface of the wood conductive so that when we put the electrodes on, we can burn those lightning patterns onto the wood. So let's get this thing set up and start burning some wood. Okay, we're going to start by getting a little strip of this wood wet. And we're going to let it soak in for a little bit. If you're interested in this, I've also done 2 other videos that I'll put end screens and links in the description of the video. I did another walking stick that turned out pretty good, and I also did a wood bowl. So I'll have those up and you guys could check those out if you're interested in it. So we'll go ahead and get this wet in this little strip to start out with, let it soak in, then we'll apply it again, and we'll go ahead and start burning. Electricity doesn't ask permission. It finds the path of least resistance and carves its story into the wood. What you're seeing here is fractal burning, high voltage crawling through grain like lightning trapped in slow motion. It's part science, part chaos. I mix up a conductive solution and hit it with the electrodes and let the current do what it does best: search, scorch, and sculpt. Every branch, every split, it's unpredictable. You don't guide it, you respect it. And if you're not careful, it'll remind you why it's not a hobby for the distracted. Now, taking a look at the stick after we've started burning, you could see it's burning in different sections here, but it's burning basically in one area, which is exactly what I want. I'm doing what's called a controlled burn. So as you put your solution on here, it follows where the solution is, and then you can do anywhere that you want as a controlled burn. We're reapplying it. This tends to dry out pretty quick while you're using it because of the heat going through the wood. So it's important to reapply it when you notice that your wood's starting to dry out a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and burn some more. I don't really like talking too much while I'm doing this. I like to concentrate, but I'm trying to explain a little bit how it goes and what the process is, so you can get a pretty good idea and you can actually watch it work. I'll probably set the camera up and let it go on its own and stop talking so I can concentrate on this. I also use a fan to blow the smoke out, but I didn't want the noise from the fan to be too loud in the video. So I'll let these two join together, and then I'll go ahead and turn the fan on and stop talking. As you can see, the wood's kind of drying out around where the electricity's going through it, so that's why you have to reapply it so it remains conductive. Now that we've got our burn done, check this out. It's looking pretty good. We got the whole stick or shillelagh coated. We got it all burned in with those lightning fractal patterns. Looks pretty good. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take this toothbrush and we're going to clean out all of these under the hose and make sure there's no ash in there. All right, now we're in the backyard, and this step is really important. All this ash in here is going to stain your wood if you don't get it out. So I always use a soft toothbrush when I can to get it out so you don't scratch the wood up. But there might be some sections where you need to use something with some harder bristles, and this is a brass one. So the brass is a little softer than metal, and you can kind of get in there and get that stuff out with the brass one too. But with the harder metal like the brass, as opposed to the toothbrush, you will scratch up your wood a little bit, and then you may have to sand those rough edges down, which will remove some of the finer detail in what you're doing. So let's go ahead and get this thing cleaned up best we can, get all this ash out of here, and then we'll go and dry it out and see what it looks like. All right, now that we've taken the brushes and cleaned out all those channels, you could see the detail a lot better, and we've got all the ash out of there. And so that'll avoid this coming out and staining things, staining your clothes. And if you decide to put a finish on this, it won't mess that up either. So we've got it pretty well done. You can see how we've gotten everything out of here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to lay it out in the sun to dry, and then we'll be ready to finish it up. Now we're back in the workshop, and I think what I'm going to do is maybe do some embellishment on this. I've got these really cool magnetite marbles here, and I think I'm going to space some of these evenly around here. I was going to place them throughout the stick here, but I think a ring of them around here would look pretty cool. So let's kind of get that set up and get the holes drilled and see about getting those in there so we can get this shillelagh finished up. I've gone ahead and marked this bit. It's about the diameter of the marble, just a little bit smaller, so we can press fit in there. And you can just barely make out I've made a line there that shows the depth that I'm going to go to. We'll keep working our way down until we hit that line. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go around and do all of them. Now that we've got the holes drilled about where we want them, I put a few more in there than I thought I was going to. I actually had some wormholes in there, and I figured why not just fill those up with the little marbles. So I'll go ahead and get those in. I'm going to use a little craft glue to help hold them in. And we'll check it out once I get them all put in there. Let's see if I can do this where you guys can see. This is how I'm getting these little marbles in there. Got a cotton swab and I'm dipping it in the craft glue, getting it in the hole there. And I made the hole just a little smaller than the marble. So it just kind of sits there like that. And then I put it down here in the vise. And then we go ahead and gently tighten it up. I know you can't see that going in there, but tighten it up a little bit, just enough to push it in so it seats down in the hole, and the glue will hold that in place. That's how we're getting those in there. Check that out. Now all we have left to do is put a finish on it and test it out. All right, it's time to apply a little finish on here. I have epoxy coated these sometimes, and that turns out pretty good. I've also used teak oil, but this time I'm going to try some Minwax wood finish. It's a natural stain, and I think it should look pretty good and bring out the wood grains a little bit and not be too dark and kind of keep that natural color. So let's put a little bit on there and check it out. Yeah, that's going to look nice. Won't be too dark. I think it'll be just right. So with that being said, let me go ahead and get this stain applied, and then we'll check back in and look at it when it's all done. let's check this thing out. It's not quite dry yet, but I think it turned out really good. That stain is just right. It's not too dark. It still can see the lightning patterns in there. I think that turned out really nice. There's the business end right there. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comments section below. Now, let's go try it out. All right, we're gonna put this thing to the test. Let's say you're out on a walk by yourself or with your family, and you got a dummy here. Let's just call him Gavin. And you know that he means you no good. But you're taking a walk with your shillelagh. You give him a warning, and then not bad. And it's just a walking stick, right? I hope you found the video entertaining, learned a little something, and I know why my grandma used to call these regulators. So if you liked the video, come back for more. There'll be plenty more stuff that we make and get into. And I want to thank everybody for watching.